Hey friends, welcome back. The Polyend Synth is an awesome performance tool for playing 3 synths at once. But one thing I find it's missing for a lot of my playstyle is a dedicated song mode or pattern sequencer. We have track sequencers and arpeggios and we can lash them using the shift button, but you can't do a lot in the way of mutes and programming changes. So today we're gonna break down how to MIDI sync or send MIDI from an external sequencer, whether that's your DAW or a piece of hardware like the Digitakt, so that we can get the best of both worlds. Timestamps are in the description. Let's get into it. So first we're going to need to talk about the actual cables you need. So typically with any sort of MIDI, you're going to need the classic MIDI cable, but the Polyend Synth has 8-inch inputs even for the MIDI, so you will need an adapter. But one thing that you're going to need to note is that Polyend uses MIDI Type B cables, and so it looks just like the MIDI Type A. I actually have a MIDI A here. Other than this one being to the side, which I just bought it that way, they look very similar, right? But you'll see here on this one I've got, it says Type A. On this, even though it's not labeled, this is a MIDI Type B, and that's what you're gonna need. So don't be like me and spend an hour trying to figure out why it's not connecting and be all worried and then realize, oh, it's just the MIDI Type B. And then this is just a standard MIDI cable. I have links to everything I'm using in the description if you want to check it out. What we're going to do is connect this. So I'm just going to go to MIDI out on the Digitakt and plug this in. And you can do MIDI over USB, and I'll show you what changes you need to make when you're setting it up. Then we're just going to take the cable and the adapter and go to MIDI in on the Polyend Synth. So now that we have everything connected, we do need to go into the menus of each device. So to get to the menu in Synth, we're going to hit this value knob and we're going to go over to the menu MIDI. And from there, you're going to want to make sure that clock in and transport in are both set to MIDI in jack. By default, it will be internal. If you are using your DAW or some form of MIDI over USB, make sure you switch that to MIDI in USB. Same goes for transport in. And then if you want to send MIDI out of the Polyend Synth, you can turn clock out on to enable the clock from synth to transmit over to whatever other gear you're using. Now that we've got Polyend Synth all set up, we're going to go to our other device, the one that we want to send MIDI from, and we're going to go into the settings to just make sure that everything's working and set the way we want it to send MIDI and whatever else we want to send out of this into the Polyend Synth. So on the Digitakt, I'm going to go hit settings, go down to MIDI config, and we're going to first check out sync, and we're going to want to make sure that clock receive, clock send, transport receive, transport send are all turned on. Program change receive and send, yes, you can turn that on as well if you want to do more CC type changes, controlling different parameters and things like that. We're not going to get into that in this video, but we can in a future video if you do want to see more on that. The main thing we want is that we want to send clock and we want to send transport. Receives, we're not doing any MIDI in, so it doesn't matter, but if you were, that's it. Now, if you're doing a DAW, it should be pretty similar to this, but if you're having issues, let me know in the comments. I'll make another video. So from there, we need to get to our settings. So we're going to tap the value knob. We're going to go to synths. And then here's what we need to look at. The MIDI IO, this second shelf. As you can see, I already have it linked. Jack number 1 is MIDI channel 1 if you're using a cable. If you're using USB, you need to use the USB settings. I wasted some time trying to figure out why this wasn't working even with the MIDI Type B. And it was because you need to go to jack, not USB if you're using MIDI cables. Set whatever channel you need. And then on the Digitakt here, or whatever you're using, you can go to a MIDI channel. I'm going to go to 10. We're going to go to source. We're going to hit function and A. And that gets us right to channel 1, which we have set. So for this one, let's go to jack 5. And let's do for this MIDI channel 5. And now if we go over to chromatic mode, go to the synth. We can control it. So that's pretty much all you need to get started. This is the way to sequence the synths. There are programmable CC changes that you can do, and if you want me to talk about that, those are a little bit more advanced, but I'm happy to cover it. Just let me know in the comments. But from here, let's actually just make a beat. So I have this drum and bass drum loop. So let's go in and record something. We can use track 1, I've got that on channel 1 and jack 1 on here. So we've got this kind of interesting arpeggiated sound. So maybe we can use that. Let's go into chromatic mode. get that in. We're gonna record that. Now we can mute 9. So with this, I think it really unlocks one key feature that I feel like is a little bit lacking on the Polyend Synth. It's amazing for performance, but it's not a groove box. And what I'd really like to be able to do is create sounds and sources and mute them. Using this method definitely gives you the best of both worlds there. If you've got any questions, let me know in the comments. Do you use MIDI sequencing, or are you doing a lot of live jamming on the Polyend Synth? I definitely, since I started doing it this way, have been doing a lot more complex tracks where I'm sending chord progressions or a bass line on the Digitakt to the Polyend Synth, and then I'm jamming live on top of that, but I'm able to do track mutes and all that type of stuff. It's a really nice workflow, and maybe something we'll explore in a future live stream. I'm gonna have a 2-month honest thoughts on the Polyend Synth very soon, so if you want to see more tutorials on the Polyend Synth, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. If you got some value out of the video, leave a like, it helps a ton, but just hanging out is more than enough. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.